Hey everyone, it's Matt here with Nightrun Studio, and so far in our NPC series we've added special conditional dialogue so that you can need to talk to specific NPCs to unlock conversation, or have visited specific zones. In this last conditional dialogue video, we're just going to make it so that you have to have a specific item in order to trigger new conversations. All of this is helping us head towards our quest system, which will be starting shortly, but let's not get ahead of ourselves and let's just get started. All right, now the very first thing we're going to do is actually head into our dialogue scriptable object script, as we want to add items as a conditional requirement. So let's come up top here where we've already added a required NPC and locations array, and now we'll just do the same for items. And for this, we'll make it a public item scriptable object array, as that's what we set up in our shop and inventory system. Now down below, we're going to check to see if those conditions are met. So if we've checked through any required NPCs and locations and everything's still checked out, it hasn't failed our test, we're now going to check for an item. Here we'll just do another if statement. So if required items dot length is greater than 0, meaning there is in fact an item required for this conversation, we can head down. However, in order to continue, we need a way to check our items. Now for this video, we are going to assume you've been following along with the inventory system in this series. However, if you haven't, you should have something pretty similar to what we have set up here and should be able to follow along just fine. Now in our system, we've got this inventory canvas, which has our specific items. When I open it up, you can see that we've got these slots. In our case, we've just got 3 right now, but each slot has a inventory slot script on it. This just holds 2 important pieces of information for us: the item SO itself, and also the quantity of that item. Those are the things we're going to check to see whether or not we have specific items. Now, in order to check for our items, we'll head into the inventory manager, which holds an array of item slots, and we're just going to want to loop through those slots and look for specific items. To do this, let's head on down below all of our methods here, like add and use item, and create a new one called has item. This is just going to take in an item scriptable object, and that'll just be the item we're looking for. Also, it's going to either return a true or false value, depending on whether we find the item, so let's make this a public bool. Now inside of here, we're just going to use a for each loop to go through each of the slots in the item slots array. We'll then just use an if statement to check if the slot's item scriptable object is equal to the scriptable object that we're looking for. We'll also do a quick check to also make sure that the slot's quantity is greater than 0. That way, if there's some artifact and the slot wasn't reset after being emptied, we'll catch it through one of these 2 checks. At this point, we can return true as we have the item and its quantity is greater than 1. If, however, we go through the entire for each loop and don't find the item, or at least don't find any quantity, we'll return false. Now at this point, we're still going to need an easy way for our dialogue scriptable object and the NPC holding it to check our inventory manager. At the moment, we can't do that quickly in scene with a reference, as our inventory manager goes with our player between scenes and the NPC only exists in a specific scene. For the moment, we're going to bring in the Singleton pattern yet again. However, you may notice that we've been using this a lot lately, and I don't like getting so carried away with it. So in a video a little later in the series where we fix some bugs and improve the system, we will actually move away from the Singleton pattern. However, for this video, let's go ahead and implement it anyways, as it will work nicely. So here, to do that, we'll just make this a public static inventory manager called instance. Remember, for the Singleton pattern, we just need to enforce it by making sure we never have more than 1 of these in the scene. So in our awake method, we'll just check if instance equals null, meaning there is no inventory manager. If so, we'll make this our instance, and we'll also mark it as don't destroy so that it continues with us between scenes. We'll add an else statement so that if this check runs and there's already an inventory manager in the scene, we'll just destroy this object to avoid duplicates. Now that we have easy access to our inventory manager and a way to check its items, we can head back to our dialog SO and finish our conditional statement. Here, if our required item's length is greater than 0, meaning we need an item, we're going to add a for each loop. We'll go through each of the items in that require items array, and now we're going to check if, and once again, as we did with our other statements, we're trying to disprove that the condition is met. So we'll say if the inventory manager.instance does not have this item, and we'll pass along the item from our required items list, then we would just return false. However, if all of the items check out, it would head down below to return true, and we know the condition's been met. At this point, we'll just do a little setup. I'm gonna drag in my loot prefab here. You'll notice on our loot prefab that it's just got a sprite here underneath, which is pretty simple. It's currently empty. And then on the prefab itself, we just have a circle collider set as a trigger, an animator to make it hop up in the air when we collect it, and finally a loot script, which just has a scriptable object. I'm gonna make this one a like button, as well as how many we're going to collect. Let's just make it worth 1. I'm just gonna quickly duplicate this and add another item into the scene. This time we'll just make it a comment box. And there we go. We've now got 2 items in our scene that we can make our conversation depend upon. Now I'm just gonna click on NPC Bob here, and we're just gonna add a new empty conversation at the end, and I'll just take a second to create that. I'm just gonna begin by copying an existing conversation here, and we'll rename it using the pattern of the NPC's name and then the conversation content. So in this case, it's gonna be about the comment box and like button. Here we'll just have Purple Bob say, hello, I need my epic items. And there's gonna be no requirements for this one, so I'm just gonna make sure that all of these are zeroed out so that it can play by default. I'll then just duplicate this, and I'm gonna rename this one so that it will only play if we have found those items. We'll give him some dialogue. I see you found my epic items. Please be sure to use them. And now we can go ahead and set our required items for this one. In our case, we're gonna have 2. We're gonna make it that he needs to have collected both the comment box and the like button. All right, at this point, we can drag them in. I'm gonna start with the one that has no requirements, and we'll move this up to the highest priority for conversations. Then just gonna add 1 more. We'll put our one when we found the items, and we'll just move it up on top of that so that those 2 will be prioritized. However, we will run into a little bit of a problem here. If I click on Bob, you can see comment box at the top. Greeting is element 2. However, when I go to talk to him, you'll notice that the comment box got deleted altogether and it skipped on down to the greeting. Now the reason for these shenanigans is just that our for loop is designed to start at the top, but keep going. Even if it's found a valid conversation, it'll keep going to see if there are other valid conversations lower on the list, and then it will replace it with those. Now for the moment, we're gonna do a simple fix, and that is just gonna be that as soon as we find a valid conversation, we're gonna break off our loop. Now this will sort of solve things as we'll get the correct conversation here right at the beginning. However, we've introduced a new problem, and that's just that if we leave and come back, we'll notice that now, because there's another valid conversation, it's deleting the one it already showed us and jumping on to the next. Now, things do work. The first time we talk to him, he tells us he needs his items, and we can go and get those items. If you want to keep your NPCs pretty simple and not have multiple quests that they send you on, this will work just fine as is. That said, ultimately, we want to make our system more complex, so that's only upon completing quests will it delete old conversations, and we want a little bit better of a queuing system. Now this is a complexity I plan to add as we head into our quest system. However, for the moment, we're gonna stop there as we do have dialogue now that is capable of being gated behind NPCs, locations, and items. We just can't queue a whole bunch of them together really effectively just yet. That said, we'll get there. Hope to see you in those videos. Until that time, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.